Hi, Michael Falato here again from Full Throttle Falato Leads and Go to Market Full Throttle. This is the Full Throttle Leaders podcast. We have a special guest today from Cutwater, the CEO of Cutwater, Chuck McBride. How you doing, Chuck?
Very good, Michael. How are you?
Good, good. So we had a great little discussion before the podcast started, but I would love to tell the audience a little bit about your background and how you got started in the agency world and where you kind of worked, and then how you got started at Cutwater.
Yeah. I got out of college and the last thing I wanted to do was have a job. So I spent my time working construction and surfing in San Diego.
Hmm.
As I started to look around, I got a job at a photo shop where I was doing some of the film processing, and the most interesting stuff was being done by the agencies, the photographers that were working for agencies.
Uh-huh.
So as I started talking to them about how I might be able to get in the business, they gave me some names and it ended up because I had a photo background, I got into print production at BBDO West in Los Angeles, California. And so I started off there as an assistant to the production department, worked my way up as a producer, doing a lot of print production, going to the press runs and doing all the separations and whatnot for magazines and newspapers. And I eventually started looking at the ads I was working on and saying, "Why, I could write a better ad than that." So I started taking the old ads and creating my own ads out of it. And eventually, some of the creative directors there looked over my shoulder long enough to say, "What are you doing?" "Oh, that's not bad. You should keep doing that." And I was really fortunate enough. They sent me to a place called Carson and Roberts, which is invite only ad school in Los Angeles there. And that's kind of when the bug bit, and I decided I was going to become a copywriter. My finally got my first break down in San Diego at a place called the Franklin Associates, working on San Diego Zoo, um, Echelon rackets, stuff like that for Vitro Robertson, a very famous San Diego duo that to this day are some of the finest people I've ever worked with.
Hmm.
After that, I was able to get back up to Los Angeles, working for the Tom Cordner at Lexus. He was at Team One doing the Lexus motor car. So I helped launch the Lexus motor cars and stayed there for a good 4 years almost. But the problem when you're doing cars is it takes like a year just to get one idea out of the shop. You spend all this time getting one thing done. It just wasn't enough. I wanted to be doing more work. Um, Dan Wyden had seen one of my car ads and it asked me if I'd like to help him out on Subaru. And I don't know if no, we all know that Where Suckers Moon book came out. There's a storied legend about Subaru and Wyden. Anyway, I showed up right about the time that they lost the account, and so I did very little there. But I did help win Sports Center is the first when we landed that job. So I don't know if you know, but Sports Center is one of those legendary accounts that Wyden had for years, and I was really glad to be a part of the beginning of that. But it wasn't enough to keep the agency up, and they ended up having to close. And I ended up coming up from LA. I was on a shoot down there, came up to LA and met with Jeff Goodby. He was doing something that he felt was really kind of powerful. They were doing a commodity, is how he put it. It's like we're going to advertise a commodity. It's like a one in a lifetime opportunity. I said, "Well, what is it?" He says, "It's milk." And so I was able to come up to Goodby Silverstein and be a part of the original group on the Got Milk account.
Hmm.
I did that for about 5 years and ended up working on Isuzu, specialized bikes. I touched pretty much everything at Goodby for a long time. And then it came that time where, the folks at Footcone came around and they asked me if I'd help them with Levi's after Mike Kelker, a legendary art director on Levi's, had unfortunately passed away. So I took his place and I ran Levi's for a few years at a foot cone. We did some famous, wonderful work. I was really excited about that. But again, it was an agency that had not a whole lot of other doors to open while you were inside of it. And so I was sitting in a production studio and I got a phone call. And again, it was from Wine and Kennedy saying, "Okay, we fucked up in Philly. We want you to come to Portland and help us out." So I said, "All right, I'll go there. Let's go. Let's give that a try." I've always wanted to go try that. So I went up to join the crew up in Portland. I ended up running the Nike business. The unfortunate part is the day I started, they had lost half the account to Goodby Silverstein of
Oh
all
God,
places.
it's such so incestuous. The
So the day I start, and and then Dan comes to me and says, should I be worried? And I said, yeah, you should be worried. These guys are good. So but but at after 2.5 years, and one of the better things I've accomplished in my career, we were able to win it all back. So it took us a little while, but we won all the business back. It came back to the right agency in terms of the legendary relationship that Phil Knight and Dan Wine had. Unfortunately, it took a little toll on me, and I needed to go fix my marriage back in San Francisco. So
yeah,
I I took off, and at that time, it was funny. I met Bob Cooperman over in Cannes in France, and Bob said, "Hey, you just helped Dan. Lee needs you now. Lee could really use your help." And so at that point in time, I took a job at Chiat San Francisco. I came down. He had Levi's at the time, and we ended up doing some really wonderful work here. So that's the second time I worked on Levi's, and ended up doing some stunning creative for that. I stayed there. Now I stayed at Chiat for another 10 years after that. That was kind of my home, and I made it so. I grew to be the North American creative director. That included both Vancouver and Toronto out of Canada, and then the three agencies we had in the United States, Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco. So really just, it's almost an HR position for the most part. You would kind of come into the office, and the best thing you could do is encourage them that, to do their best, and, you have their back, but also to hire the right people to get into those agencies and start to take care of the work. So I did that for a long time, but more importantly, I formed a great partnership with Lee and Lee Clow at the agency, and he and I became, partners on Adidas. And so when we ended up working on Adidas, he and I kind of chose an interesting relationship because, he's an art director and I'm a writer, so it worked out really well that way.
what would you say? What would you say one of your projects that you hatched yourself was like one of the crown jewels of what you did in your life?
Jeez, that's a tough one, man. Because as I said, winning Nike back after it walked away from the agency was a big fucking deal. That was a heavy lift. That was a really heavy lift. And I don't know, this was an agency that was famous for this account, and half the business went away. And so winning that back it's right up there. It's right up there with number one.
Yeah,
When it comes down to the work, the Nike was one of the most dynamic clients to work with. They demand excellence. And with that, there's a responsibility to do work that's excellent. And so you have to make stuff better at every turn,
who came
It's
up
got
with Just Do It?
that was Dan. That was Dan back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But we revived it while I was there, and we did some award-winning work by just reviving it because it had basically been dormant for almost 15 years by the time I got there. And one of the suggestions that I made in a all hands meeting was, why don't we relaunch Just Do It? The last time, an 18-year-old saw a Just Do It ad, it was a guy with a prosthetic leg, running down a racetrack, and I said, I don't think that's the last way you want people to remember the campaign. And so we ended up revising it and did a bunch again, a bunch of beautiful award-winning work to the highest of caliber. We came into Cannes actually for 2 years in a row, and we're client we were client of the year 2 years in a row with the launch of Just Do It. And
Was
then
that
I was then
Jordan
the
or was that pre-Jordan or post-Jordan or during Jordan?
it was during Jordan. Yeah, I worked on Jordan as well. It was during Jordan.
Mhm.
It was right when he was retiring, to be fair. One of the last ads I did for Jordan was a goodbye ad where we took his
I did
life.
it. Did you write I did it?
No, I should have, but
See,
it was
you could have
we
used
ended up we
that
ended up
one.
taking his life backwards. Like it started off with him holding up six, and then we just go all the way back to his mom gave us a photograph of Michael when he was like 12 years old in a football uniform, just standing there as this little kid holding his helmet. And that's the shot we end on. And it just says, just do it. And so it was actually part of our relaunch of Just Do It, ironically. But
Was that ever like I did it? Was that ever part of it?
no, no, I think that one of the things you don't want to fuck with is that fucking line, man. You
Yeah.
got to work with it. Don't
Oh,
change it.
yeah.
You
You're like, get out of here, Falato.
exactly.
That's the stupidest idea ever said.
The lawyers would say that too, I think,
But
by the
yeah,
way.
but Jordan would be the only guy that can do it.
Well, eventually Jordan's brand became, much more about his brand. Like
Air
it was,
Jordan. Yeah.
yeah, it became much more about, it was going to move from just being basketball and shoe driven to clothing and everything else. I
Football
think now
uniform. Did he
they're
make
actually doing
football?
golf right now.
Yeah.
They're doing a Jordan golf initiative right now. So, that it was one of the better business decisions that, Phil made, I think, was hiring that guy because look at the line extensions it's created. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
But the highlight, gosh, there's so many. It's like I don't think your career is ever defined by one sort of moment. It's the collection of moments.
How about something in the last year or two that said, "Oh God, that was a bad idea. I don't want anybody to fall in that trap," or something that you did last year in strategy, tactics, or AI that was the best idea you want to pass on?
Hmm, gosh, um, I would say walking into meetings thinking that AI is going to solve the problem is one of those bad ideas because it's not only apparent, but to me it shows kind of a lack of authenticity if someone's just spitting out information now in a meeting that they, kind of use to AI to develop. I think it's much more comfortable to say, hey, I ran this through OpenAI a few times and look what I got, as opposed to saying,
I
this is what
did,
you should do, this is what you should do, this is what you should do. So where I've seen it kind of bite people in the ass is transparency. You
yeah,
know,
be
you know,
honest up front. You know,
yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where we're all kind of wondering, where things come from. And I think it's important to be, transparent about that. Now, to be fair, in the future, we're all going to be using it. I collaborate with AI all the time, but I generally use it not as an output. Generally, what I try to do is I try to formulate a human insight that I think is interesting, and then you use then AI is like one of my better, tennis partners because, you just keep on hitting refresh and you get more. And I've always felt like when you're as a writer, one of the cool things you had as an art director partner is sitting in a room going, what about, what about, what about?
yeah,
That's kind of the benefit right now for me with AI. I can take numerous ways I would like to solve a problem and have it play with it a little bit. And if it spits back something that I think is better than where we were, oh, that's a build. That's a
it's the
build. But
prompts. A lot of it's the prompts, like write this or put
yeah,
this in the theme of
yeah,
that. Like I've said, like when I was doing some emails to some IT guys, I'm like, what if I came with them some sort of Star Wars theme messaging that would make them laugh instead of just, sending a marketing message. And it
yeah,
worked, you know?
yeah. Listen, and that's the magic. But I think that the kind of like come in and not be transparent. And again, this is almost more theoretical, but there have been meetings that I've been in. It was clear that the creative came from AI. It's been clear that the strategy came from AI. And so you're kind of wondering, number one, why am I paying you? And
Yeah,
what
tell us about
do I need you for this?
tell us about Cutwater water and like what you guys focus in on most. How big is your company? Where are you based out of? Like, give
Well,
us
we've
a
got
little background for people that don't know Cutwater.
Yeah, it's cool. Well, we've been around since 2007. We went independent in 2011, and so we were part of Omnicom prior to that, and then we took ourselves independent in 2011, and ended up kind of bootstrapping it a little bit because when you leave Omnicom, it's not it's a delicate situation because you don't want to piss them off so that they sick lawyers on you and stuff like that. And so we had to kind of tiptoe around that and got some clear space and ended up building up a fairly substantial, real Adidas, not, excuse me, not, Levi's hired us again. So that was the third time I worked on Levi's. Um, I was able to work with a lot of my ex Nike clients. They hired us up to do Easton Sports and some of the subsidiaries that they had started working on in the sports industry. Once all those guys got out, they kept on wanting to work, so they found these other cool little sports brands to go work for, and I was really fortunate to have been called to come in and help them on stuff like that, bikes and baseball bats, stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. The the We ended up picking up Brawny, which is kind of interesting, my first foray into packaged goods and what have you. So I've just learned a lot. And when you go independent, it's a whole different story. You're not sitting around with a, a global budget to go do things. It's not your network isn't important. It's really your authenticity and what you can deliver personally for those brands you're working for. So we got into some good spaces with, financial institutions. We had great brand work that we've done for pet food and what have you. So, I mean, we are one of the scrappiest agencies in America because I think that we have the experience of a White and Kennedy, BBDO, but we're also incredibly nimble so that, we're coming to conclusions a little quicker. We're also keeping our meetings small so the decision makers are the ones in the room. But I now have an office in New York as well as San Francisco, so we're bi-coastal at this point. Would love to go international at some point with the proper client. And I think that I'm
About 50 people, right?
yeah, and yeah, and the real legacy of Cutwater is the pride of an independent shop in a world of holding companies, giving you the expertise that came from those companies in a property that's much more nimble and much more financially affordable, because we're not charging you the same kind of overhead.
And what's your ideal customer profile at Cutwater?
I'm thinking the way I think about ideal customers is, I've worked with more imperfect brands than perfect brands, and it was kind of twisting the imperfect brand into a better brand that was a little bit more, I think, rewarding.
Mhm.
Working on a brand that already had everything going for it, there wasn't a lot to do other than just maybe push it faster. Whereas, when you're coming in on a brand that really had nothing and you built something out of scrap, I think that was important. Ray-Ban was a great example. They had come in and they hadn't done advertising in years, and we came up with the Never Hide campaign based on some great insights. And, we ended up blowing them up and they became the number one, you know, sunglasses in the world.
Yeah,
So, that was a big difference maker. And so for me, I like clients with ambition. I want companies that I want great companies that want to become great brands. I think that's what I think
yeah.
we're really good at.
And
You know,
who
you
should
tell
reach?
me a great company, and if they don't have a great brand, that's the opportunity.
And who should they reach out to at Cutwater after watching this podcast?
That'd be Sarah Navarro.
Mm.
Yeah.
What's the best way? What's her email?
Sarah.navarro@cutwatersf.com.
Mm. Okay. And that she's kind of the director of new business type
She's
person.
our director of new business, actually, one of our longest long-term employees there. She boomerang. She worked at a couple places in between, but she came back.
And if someone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Probably through LinkedIn would be the best way.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time, Chuck. We'll definitely work together on future projects, and I appreciate you making time for this podcast.
You bet.